So all done with the laminating. I don't think there's anything else I have to laminate. And if you cut things the way I cut them and use them the way I used them, this is what you'll end up with for spare laminate, which is actually a pretty good piece. But you'll definitely want to keep that somewhere in case you have any repairs that you need it, or you get tears in there that you want to laminate back over, that kind of thing. So next, what I've got to start doing is get my radio channel cut so that I can get my servo holes cut, and that will allow me to line up where my control horns are going to go on my surfaces once I've got those guys in place. So I am going to put my ESC vertically on the left of center here with my wires coming out. My battery strap's going to go over top of that and help hold them down. I've went ahead and cut some more dual lock to go on the bottom there to also help hold it down. And I went ahead and set the depth of my cutting knife, hot knife, foam cutter, whatever, including my guide, to just a little bit deeper than where the bottom of the dual lock is. So I'm going to get this stuff traced out. This is going to go here. My receiver bind plug up is going to go on this side, and in the middle I'm going to put this controller is going to be on the top, my light controller, so that if I want to change patterns and stuff, that's the thing that's most easily accessible. So I know that it's going to go in here. That just helps me space out and see where it is I want to put my receiver. So I'm going to leave enough room on the end there for, say, the bind plug to get through. So let's get this stuff traced out. I'm going to give myself a good baseline here that's nice and square, because I can still see that nice black line I made at the step one, although it tends to start disappearing as you put layers on and layers on, which is a good thing, right? That just gives me a nice square line to work with, to line everything up with. So now I'm going to put my ESC in place. About the ESC, before I go any further on that, I've done some modifications to it. I took the battery connector apart and desoldered it, and then put on my JST lead, right? And I shortened the battery wires, especially the negative side, so that my wires now have a natural curve to where they're going to be going towards my battery plug. And I had a good idea of where I wanted my battery to be, so I was able to get it to just the right length, so I have as little bulk as possible outside the airplane, creating wind resistance. Also shortened up the receiver wire coming off of the ESC so that I have a little less bulk going on there as well. So here we go. And this pin really marks well. It's one of those OptiFlows from Staples, and is very easy to clean off too if you go overboard with it. And I'm just going to leave a nice round end here for my wires and such to come through there. And then on this end, I need to put my receiver around about here. That will work. There we go. All right, so now I'm ready to start cutting. Right now I have this knife set at the depth for my ESC, which is a little bit deeper than my receiver. So I'm going to start over here and then have to reset my needle. Starting on the left with the ESC. Remember, I've got some wires that are in there for my lights, so I want to do my best not to touch them. Now that I've got laminate in, I can show you how that, oh, I need to plug this in. Yeah, so here, especially since I've got laminate in here, in order to get a nice clean hole, I'm just going to use the tip of the iron to cut through the laminate because it is a lot more heat resistant than just the foam. I'm going to just keep going all the way across front of my receiver here, or back, however you want to look at it. And then I can kind of freehand here. And now this is just set deep enough for the ESC. So I'm going to go through. Doesn't feel like I'm all the way through. If I was all the way through, I would feel the extreme tape on the bottom. I'm going to freehand the curve here. Come right across the top. I'm going to remove the laminate from the top. Get these wires out of my way. Finish. Full depth, everything on the left. And since I've got that little freehand channel cut at the end here, it's going to be real easy to go around this circle. It's just going to follow that laminate I've already cut there because it just doesn't have much resistance to it. I'm going to put another cut down the middle here so that it's easier to pull out. Cleaner to pull out, I should say. I don't know if easier is the right word. And that is, looks like right through to the bottom, which is totally fine. Did not burn any lights. Did not burn any extreme tape. There we go. And where I would normally put some epoxy down, I may just adhere that sucker down just like that. So, because I can see I've got some lights in here. And so I don't want to epoxy over top of that, just in case those are the ones I end up having to repairing at some point. So I think it'll just stick right down on top since I'm not working with EPP. Before I do that, while I've got this depth set, I am going to line up my heatsink. Now this, I'm installing this vertically because really that's the best way to protect the ESC in the event of a crash, to keep it from getting ejected and to also have all that foam to absorb the impact. I have made some with installation up like this with the cooling fins over the top, thinking that would be good for cooling, and it is. But if you do that, I would advise adding an additional Velcro strap over here on the side. Or if you can, man, just put it in vertical. And to keep it cool, since that foam acts like a heater, I'm going to come here to where the heatsink is and mark it. And then take my ruler. Looks like that is an even inch. So there's a 1/2 inch, there's a 1/4 inch. So now I've got 5 little marks here. And with that depth still set, I'm going to take my tip and cut at each mark. And then go all the way down and out, down, out, down, and out, out, down and out. And make vent holes that go all the way down there to allow some cooling on those fins there. There you go. Forgot my battery relief, and I want that long depth, so I'm going to go ahead and heat this thing back up and get in here and take care of what I should have taken care of a minute ago. Being careful not to toast my wires. This is going to give me plenty of room for all my wires. And if you're going to cut and make things too tight or too loose, always try to make things too tight first, right? And always cut another swath down it and make it bigger if I need to. But everything generally wants to be nice and tight, especially a receiver. If you're using one like this Spectrum AR630 that I've got here, it's an antennaless receiver, which makes installation easy, as well as obviously has gyros, AS3X, Safe Select. I will be updating this one so that it has the AS3X Plus. The big advantage I've found there for these things is the hand launch assist. Although I will say you've got to put the G load really low because you are not throwing this and then starting it. I usually hold it by the wingtip, but that's for another video, I think. Gonna make another relief cut down here in the middle so things come out clean. Ah, yeah, that's hot. So see, I've still got those like channels down in there. I don't know if you can see that or not. So now I'm going to do my printer method with that depth set and just go back and forth and get rid of all those two high ridges. Taking my time, being patient, let every swipe cut. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, see, nice and tight. That's what we want. Especially with gyros, you don't want this thing bouncing around unless the plane is bouncing around with it. All right, so for servos for this model, this is going to be kind of a higher end model. You'll see I'm using the smart receiver and ESC. All my batteries are smart batteries pretty much these days, so I'll be using that as well. I think 3S2200 is what I'm going to go for. Do recommend 100C if you got the change for it. If not, 30C, 50C will work just fine. Spectros I'm using servos I'm using are Spectrum A3040s. Be operating them at 6 volts, which means I'm going to be getting 28 ounces of torque and speed of about 1/10 of a second for 60 degrees. All metal gear. If you take this apart, there are metal gears throughout it. It is a 12-gram servo instead of a 9-gram servo that you may also use. You can use generic 9-gram servos in there, and they actually work really well and are quite durable. But I go for a little bit beefier servo for usually the ones I fly, because I crash them pretty hard. And the thing about a stronger servo is, one, on some, especially the big wings, especially on the big wings, you can really notice a difference in your roll rate and the response of the plane when you actually fly both of them and compare them and spend some time doing it. But in addition to that, one of the big pluses of using a stronger servo is that it can resist more force. So if this thing has a nose-in impact, all the weight of this control surface is probably going to get thrown forward, right? And that's going to, in lesser servos, it won't be able to push back as hard, and it can end up stripping it out. Easy to replace one if you put them in with hot glue, which I always do. But just keep that in mind when you're making your servo selections. If you're looking to save some money on your build and get in the air as cheap as possible, then do not buy this servo. Buy your Amazon, $4 9-gram Metal Gear, what is it, MG90S or something like that. Totally buy those. Use those if you want to do it as cheap as possible. But if you like a little bit more performance in your bird, then I highly recommend these or some nicer high-tech name brand servos. They're out. So I'm going to end up making a tiny little extension here. So that being the case, I will measure out how far away this is from the edge. And by edge, I mean all the way over here. And I'm going to put it at a lucky 13 inches is going to be this side here. Okay, so let me mark that just with a tiny dot that I'll forget about. And then using my square, let's see, 2.5 inches, 3 inches. I don't like it at that 2.5. So I'm going 2.5 inches from the hinge up, and 13 inches from here to here is where I am going to insert my servo. So using this nice uni-ball pin, I get a good line. All right, there's one. So cut this guy out. This is cooled off. And loosen it up. Grab my straight edge. And I want the top of this servo to be flush with the top of this wing when I get the thing seated in there. So I just traced out the very bottom of it, and then for depth, I'm going to use my straight edge. Did I tighten this down already? No. All right. There we go. Perfect. One more check. Yep. Before we go hot. Now again, when you, I've got some extreme tape in here that I'm gonna have to cut through with my razor because those filaments will give that hot knife quite a hard time. And again, it's better to cut this too small than too big. So the lines I've got on here, I actually make them disappear with my straight edge before I cut. Make sure I'm on the inside of them. Again, I'm just using the tip so that I can exactly get my stops where I want them, and then go deep, starting in the middle and out to the ends. And you'll get a nice square slot. I'm going to make a little bit more of a relief right here for my wire. Hopefully I'll have done this right. I can show you how tight it can get. printer method. Square off the bottom real good. Something catching on that ruler. There we go. Wham. Test fit. Fingers crossed. Nice and tight. So now that I've got the bottom in, I'm going to trace out my little tabs here. Mounting brackets, I guess you'd call them. I don't know. And before I change my knife depth, I'm going to cut my other side over here to save a step. So that was 13 inches if I remember correctly. Lucky 13. Down the hinge. That's where I'm going to put my dot. And then using my square, I want to come up 2.5. Let me double check that. Whoops. 2.5. I always have a harder time with this as a right-handed person. I usually have a harder time with this side. I just feel so awkward. Something like that. Next is already set. Grab our straight edge, which is getting gnarly, man. It's got so much trash all over it. All right. Oh, still got a little bit of extreme tape, which is good. It means that my extreme tape is probably on there pretty level. I'm having to do about the same to both sides. That's a good sign. Make my line disappear. Oh, do my pilot cut. And then all the way down in the middle and to the outsides. And it hits a stop to the outside and it hits a stop. Same over here. Pilot cut, plunge it, go to the stop, go to the stop, and withdraw. Nope, there we go. Same towards the top. All right. So that's cut. Yeah. Let's get this back in here. These traced out. Another reason I like using these A3040s on these smaller models is that the servo mounting bracket is nice and deep, and I'm going to be putting a fat plug of hot glue on top of that, and that gives a lot of purchase, I would call it, for the glue and the foam to be friends. All right. You guessed it. Hot knife. Woo. Ah. Don't forget your straight edge when you're setting this depth. This time I've actually got to put it on the top of the servo and come down. It's still really hot. That's why I'm having so much trouble here. It's nice to have more than one needle, you know, if you don't ruin your other ones. Screwing them too hard. This wouldn't take nearly as long if this thing was cool. All right. There we go. So I'm just setting this to the bottom of that mounting bracket. Okay, it's finally cool now. That, ow, except for that piece. Yep. All right, feeling good. Some more extreme tape here to cut. Don't try to just hot knife through it. It'll get gnarly. Yeah. Just getting the trash out. Go for a test fit. Bam. Just right. Okay. So I was talking about the pluses and minuses of mounting the servos back here instead of up here. Another minus of it is that your cord is going to be going over your extreme tape on the top here, which you have a strip right here, right? You could take a razor knife and cut a slit there to stuff it in, but then you're cutting through your extreme tape, and I really don't want to cut through that since it's kind of keeping some stability when the wing flexes down this way. So what I like to do is just run it over top of just where the extreme tape is, and then I'll cut a razor slot to stuff it in the rest of the way. Cover it with some good quality clear Scotch tape, and it'll sit right there. Alternatively, one other thing I've done is when you know for sure where your servos are going to go, before you put down your extreme tape, you could cut a channel here wide enough to stuff your servo lead through, and that's another way of doing it there that I've done, which is pretty slick, because then you don't have this lump here across the top to mess with your airflow, and you don't have that extra exposed wire to get cut by a prop potentially, which is not the end of the world. But yeah, so that'll be hanging out just like that. So just thoughts on servo placement. I guess I need to get my glue gun going. So since I'm waiting on this glue gun to get a little hotter, I'm going to go ahead and mark where I do want to make my cuts to stuff my wires down in. So I'm just going to pull it tight from the servo to where I want it to enter the radio channel right there. Do the same on this side. So that's taken care of. All right, hot gun or glue gun's nice and hot. I'm gonna fill that until I have a nice little dome coming out the top, because it will probably settle a little bit. I'm gonna lean it to the side, put one bead down each side, and then let that roll. If I wanted to smooth things out, I might use a popsicle stick. Looks like I got a little bit of glue on the metal gears. Nice job, Russ. Servos are in, brah. All right, next thing I like to do now that my servos are installed and my cat has been snuggled so that she won't bother me anymore is get some power going to these servos and go ahead and get the horns on so that we can start lining up where we're going to put our horns in here. Or excuse me, get the arms on so we can install the horns. So get some power going to it. I love my Spectrum XBC100 smart checker. Obviously it checks my smart batteries. It also checks all my normal batteries if I had a few still. And it is really good servo driver too. So I just use it on basically every setup I do when I don't want to feel like hooking up a radio and a receiver. And make sure that's centered. I can check it. Yep, everything's working. Leave it centered. Grab my servo arm. I'm going to use this one here, 4-piece. And where you could, I used to think, oh, well, I'll cut the pieces off I don't need. Now I leave them on there. because if I do break one of these, then I can just rotate this and have a spare out there in the field. The trim won't be the same, so keep that in mind. But let's find out where this sits square. If it doesn't sit square on one side, try it on the other side. And find a side that sits as close to square as you can get it. Do I like that one better? Or do I like that one better? I guess I like that one better. All right. And how big are these arms? Half inch. Man. Gotta decide which hole I'm gonna put them in. I don't think I'm gonna go all the way out. I think I'm gonna go one from the end, which from here, from center to center to the hub, will be 3/8 of an inch. And so I'm going to see if this fits in just like it is. Usually they don't, as this one is following suit. So we'll grab just a 1/16. I think 1/16 inch bit. Which end was I using? All right. And the throws that you pick on here are a pretty big decision. I like mine kind of crazy, I'll be honest with you. I like my wings to be able to tumble. But to do that, it can be a little extreme for a lot of people. So I just went through the bottom there. Get on as close as we can. This one takes a Phillips. And I'm going to grab a little bit of Loctite. If you've been using the liquid Loctite, this stick, it's like a glue stick almost, only it's Loctite. This is the blue medium. Way more convenient than those liquid drops. You know, just bam, you got some on there. You'll never use liquid Loctite again, I tell you. And I don't know how long that tube is going to last me, but I don't know if you would measure it in years or decades or half decades, something. We'll see if it dries out, but I keep using it. So, all right, so now we've got that on there. We've still got power going to our servo, so we know that it's in there. I'm actually going to basically do what I would do with sub trim on here and get this arm nice and square to the body of the servo. Oh, wrong way. Yep. So that's what I'm looking at. So again, now I'm able to sub trim out very accurately with this thing where I need it to be. So I love it. All right. Now we are going to be putting our quick connectors on the outside of this, and that's the brass piece that's going to slide over here. They're actually back ordered right now. This kit didn't come with any. I may have some spares. But what you want to think about is when you are putting your driver in here to tighten or loosen this connector to mechanically trim out your surface, which I really have to do with almost all of them after their initial flight, at least just a little bit, You don't want your driver to be over here interfering with your motor and your prop and stuff. So make sure you're doing it from the outside. So that means I'm going to put my control horn on the inside of this wire. So grabbing my nice pin, you know, I felt like okay, there it is. I am going to get this square on the hinge and lining it up with that push rod, just double checking that I don't want to adjust this a little bit more. Okay, not that that makes a big difference in the end of the day. And line a little bit past the extruding tape. Now I need a horn. I'm going to remove this little piece here. Whoops, I'm going to hold on to it. If you really want to be picky about this, you can trim off the little mold extras. And then I'm going to put this on here like I want it sticking through here, which is having the edge of the control horn right at the hinge. So I can line up the point on the front and the point on the back with my line and trace out. Actually, I don't need to go very far. I just need to mark front and back. I can get rid of that just to know how far to cut my line there. And with my X-Acto, keeping it very straight, I'm going to go straight down. I've lifted the wing so that it's like more or less level, and I'm going plumb with my X-Acto, straight in and straight down, following my line until I get to my stop. Pull straight out with the blade vertical. Now I should have something like this, right? But you'll notice it doesn't go all the way through. And this kind of annoys me because the horn has this nice shelf to sit on top of. So what do I do to alleviate that? Well, I go the extra mile here. I don't need this on anymore. Power down the servo for a moment. And what was this guy, yeah? To shove this in here, get about where I want it. Now I'm going to trace the back of this, which is going to be kind of tough with this black tape and black ink, but it's shiny, so I can see it. Now, I'm going to take this little piece I saved here and cut off the back. Take my straight edge and use it to set my depth. I'm going to cut it with the hot knife. So it's got little nipples on it. I'm going to go to as deep as the nipples. That's about right there. Finger tight. There we go. These are cutting good there. Now we have a nice void here. Well, let me put, we've got a slit down the middle. I'm going to put an extra little hole in there, right in the middle, to get a little extra hot glue in. Now, when I put this through now, not only do I have a little bit of depth to work with to get my hot glue to settle in here and get some purchase on that foam, as well as I will put glue on the underside of it before I insert it all the way. I can get the top of the servo horn coming out of there perfectly and sitting on top of the surface. So I've got more strength to keep this from coming out. I have used other adhesives, all right, experiment with epoxy to name one, which works really well for this. However, a customer of mine came back to me with one where he had blown it out, and I was able to repair it for him and everything, but at that point I was kind of like, man, I wish this was hot glue. This would be a lot easier to fix. So the reason I didn't use hot glue at first is because I wasn't making this relief for this, but I think with this relief, the hot glue seems to be working really well so far. You let me know how it works for you, if that's the way you build yours. Yep, so gonna need to get that on. While I'm doing that, I can go ahead and set up the other side. Okay, so while I was waiting on my glue gun to get going, I got started on the right side of the plane, and I realized why it was taking me so long to cut through that, because the colored tape, the black tape I used on the bottom, was lightweight duct tape. So just like the extreme tape, it's got those filaments in there, and my iron was having a heck of a time getting through it. So this time I am going to make some pre-cuts to get through just the top layer of duct tape. And if I am correct, this should go a lot quicker. I go ahead, since I've already got it cut, and remove it, so I don't have to smell it. There we go. Now, let's get in there. And you know, I've still got that big wide tip on here, but now's when I wish I had the smaller tip on it. If it wasn't already hot, I would change it out. But it's already hot, so we're gonna go with it. A little bit in there. I'm gonna let this come in and tack it in place. And let that set up where I want it. That's good before I fill in the top. I'm gonna get caught up on this side first though. Not too much in there. You don't want it overflowing bad. You'll just be wasting it because you're gonna, oh, see. And that's why I said that. Take some away here. That's all right. At least I know it's full, right? That is then set up. This is another big plus of using hot glue here versus an epoxy that you have to wait on for 5 minutes. This doesn't seem like long in the grand scheme of things, I guess, but it is. All right. I'm just going to fill this open hole. You know, getting hot glue on the outside of this and on the top of the laminate, be honest with you, hot glue and laminate, they don't really work for that well for very long. So that's another good thing about setting this relief in here and being able to get that hot glue onto some raw foam. That one's looking good. This one I think I need to put something under here. Okay, those are mounted up and sitting up pretty. So that's what I'm going to do for the inside and the bottom of these. Once this hot glue is set up on both ends, I will flip it over, and then I'm going to use, I guess better to show, just a clear contact cement. This is that Gorilla brand clear contact cement. It's very similar to AS6000, or if you're familiar with foam to foam, all kind of really the same deal. If you look at all the instructions, it's pretty much the same. Wet one side, put them together, pull them apart, let it outgas for 2 minutes to 5 minutes if you want it really tacky, and then put it back together, and it works like a champ. This stuff will stick to the laminate really well, so I'm actually going to use this on the top, since I don't have any real good way to get into any raw foam on the top, as just a little bit of added insurance over what we've done here. Get something on the top as well. So now we've got the back of our control horns done. Hot glue is all nice and set up. Just for the top, no big deal. Grab the back of my tweezers here, and I'm going to stuff down the laminate and a little bit of extreme tape so that I have kind of a cup there against the horn, both sides. And then I'm going to take my Gorilla Glue clear contact cement, and just get a nice bead around there. This is pretty thick stuff, actually. I like the viscosity of this adhesive when compared to the others in the family that I mentioned earlier. It seems to be a little bit thicker. So if you're looking for a thicker one, go for this. If you're looking for the thinnest one, try the foam to foam from Deluxe. Adhesives. Yep. So drawback to using this stuff is that it takes a really long time to set up. I am going to put some epoxy on this side where the servo is. I want to mark right there so I know how deep to go. And that will give me a nice little level tray of goodness down here for my dual lock to stick to, and it will really stick to it. Prefer to use mercury, but I ran out and didn't have time to order some, so just picked up the JB Weld at the hardware store. It'll work. Okay, so I don't need a whole lot for this. I'm going to go once around the cup. And then once around the cup. Oh, that one coming out a little quicker. And I know I had a popsicle stick around here somewhere. It's all right. that nice and whipped up. Well mixed. And into your hole. Spread it out where you want it. Go. And a little bit. Get away from me here. Take care of that. And this is 5 minutes. And I have a horrible sense of time, so I'm going to look at the clock. Giving the epoxy a few minutes. So easy to grab the dual lock over Velcro with the tweezers as well. If you can't tell, I really love to geek out over like adhesives and types of Velcro. All right, that's perfect. So the epoxy's still a little spongy. It's got a way to harden up, but it's still nice and tacky to get that thing on there. This side, hopefully that's going to stick as it is. Let's cut a battery slot back here. So luckily I left this clear and I can see where my lighting wires are. And obviously what I'm doing here is trying to avoid that. And that's all it takes. Just one little slit with a nice sharp razor. And I'll be able to push my pliers through there and get that later.